Hi buddy, Michael here. Today's video I'm going to be explaining why both the civic nationalists and the ethno-national socialists are all wrong and what is the correct answer. Let's go. Okay, so I'm doing this video because recently Liam Tuffs did an interview with Steve Laws, and essentially if you know Liam Tuffs, he is sort of hangs around with the Tommy Robinson, and he is what you would call a civ nat who believes that basically if people come to England that anybody can really be English as long as they embrace our culture. That's generally what civ nats believe. And then you have Steve Laws, who I would refer to as an ethno-national socialist. He essentially is well known on Twitter. He is a hardcore ethno-nationalist. And I call him an ethno-national socialist because he is a Nazi sympathizer. And he basically believes that Hitler was right, and he would like to see that form of government in the UK. So he would want to deport everybody from this country who is not 100% English. And he also believes in the Jewish question in the same kind of theory that Hitler believed, that the Jews, or there is a conspiracy by the Jews to cause our societies to destruct, etc., etc. And that's why he has some sympathies towards Hitler, which is a load of rubbish. And I have labelled him an ethno-national socialist because, I mean, in many ways, ethno-nationalism does make a lot of sense. But the problem we have is when it falls into ethno-national socialism, similar to what Hitler had. Because in my mind, technically, all nationalism is ethno-nationalism. So if you believe in nationalism, you believe, that England generally is white English, or mixed race. For an example, if an English, or like in my family, one of my family members has married an Indian woman. So the children are half English, half Indian. So those kids would be determined English in my eyes. So nationalism is determined by blood, essentially. So if you've got some form of English blood, then you're English. That makes sense. But if a million Indians come to England and they've lived here for 5 years and they've got English citizenry, that doesn't mean they're English. They're still Indian by blood. And to me, that's just common sense. So we all know, intuitively, we all know what's an English person, what's a African, what's a Chinese man, what's an Indian. We all know intuitively who's who. And that kind of blasts, the whole civnat thing is ridiculous when you think about it. And even Liam Tuffs himself, who calls himself a civnat, debunked his own thinking because he said, my Ghanaian mate, he's English. By the fact he called him his Ghanaian mate, he knows he's not really English, he's Ghanaian. Now I accept the logic is that, yes, his Ghanaian mate has come here and he's embraced the English culture, he's grown up with him. I'm the same way. I've grew up with a lot of friends who are not English, who've embraced English culture, and they are culturally English. And that is completely true. But in reality, they're still from where they're from. And this doesn't mean we have any hatred to them. We still love them, but we're just going by common sense. Just in the same way that I have family friends who moved to Australia 20 odd years ago, and they come back and they call themselves Australian. They feel Australian, but in my eyes, they're still English. They're just English people living in Australia. But what's good is that they see themselves as Australian, because they should see themselves as Australian citizens and serve Australia first and foremost. So to clarify, my position is that the ethno-nationalists' idea obviously makes 100% more sense, that it's on blood. Now, where I differ from some ethno-nationalists is that I believe that that is correct, but I have no ill will and hatred towards any foreign people who have come here. And in many cases, I've got loads of friends and even family members now who are of that, and I love and respect them, and I don't want to kick them out in a million years. This is why I have a problem with the hardcore ethnos who veer into sort of Hitler territory. I am completely against them. And the way I see the best way for humanity to proceed is that all countries should protect their own tribe, and that you want to pick out a percentage, whether it be 80, 90% of that country should remain the tribe of that country, and then you can welcome in the 5, 10, 15% of migrants to come in and assimilate and become a part of the tribe over time. That's the best way I see forward. This civic nationalist or open borders, there's no real difference between civic nationalism civic nationalism and open borders. Because in the civic eyes, you could have the country could be full of Indians who claim to be English, and it would still be England, but it wouldn't. It would only be English if the English people are there. If I went to India and it was all white English people who embraced Indian, they all became Hindus and embraced Indian culture, it wouldn't be India. It would just be English people in India. And we all know deep down intuitively what an English person and what an Indian person, etc. is. And also touching on the parts of the Steve Laws interview is that a lot of the comments, and when watching the interview, a lot of the stuff he said I agree with when he's talking about the ethno-nationalism part, about the part about if you take in all these illegals and call them English, then you're ruining England, and that England belongs to the English, just as the Dalai Lama says Europe belongs to the Europeans. Okay, so most of his things he said makes absolute sense. And a lot of the comment section said, well, Steve Laws makes much more sense than the Civnats, and he 100% does. But the problem with people like Steve Laws and sort of Nick Fuentes in America is that what they hide is that they are hardcore National Socialists. And this is a part you saw with Steve Laws' body language when Liam Tuffs asked him about Hitler and the Nazis. He got a bit awkward and nervous because he didn't want to come out as a full-blown hardcore National Socialist, or that he knows it's wrong on some level. So he was kind of like, well, you know, I don't hate foreigners, I don't hate the Jews, but, you know, Hitler had to do certain things to protect the German. He was being all a bit nervous because he was going to turn a lot of people away, I reckon. And what their idea is to use the ethno-nationalism debate, which make complete sense, and they'll win a load of people over, and they want to hide their hardcore extremism to attract people in, but then they want to gradually extreme people over time, just like what in Islam do. They'll take normal, regular Muslims, and then they'll go, oh yeah, we need to free Palestine, and no, we're just friendly Muslims who want to assimilate. And then your regular Muslim will follow the extremist, not realizing they're extreme, but gradually in time, these Islamic extremists will brainwash the good Muslims, or, you know, regular Muslim, and say, whoa, you know, these wars happen, so we need to be a bit more extreme. And then they'll promote more extreme verses from the Quran and use them even more extreme. And then they'll bring people towards, you know, terrorism. You know, we got to fight, we got to raise jihad. And then all of a sudden, you've got a load of extremists on your hand. And this is what's happening. I'm noticing it happening with young Westerners and Zoomers. They're being slowly extremized because we're all fed up with the illegal immigration or the crime or the grooming gangs or the illegals hanging around causing trouble, assaulting women. We're right to be upset and we're right to want to protect our tribe, but they're trying to profit on people's anger to bring them to their extreme idea of National Socialism. And when you go down that road, you go down the route of evil. And Steve Laws even made a post that confirmed it on Twitter when I used to be on it a lot more regular. He said something along the lines of, we're going to get our country back, or I'm going to get my country back. I'll even if I have to follow the devil along the way. And this is exactly what Hitler did. He wanted to do what he did, and he followed the devil along the way, and he ended up doing pure evil. And just to briefly touch on, they all like to go on about the Jewish question, but I've looked into this in great, great detail. And I know much more than these morons. I know all the religions, I've looked into all these theories, and I have good discernment, much better than these people. And it is basically a load of conspiracy theories that if you really, really look into it and you have good discernment, you realize they're a load of rubbish. And a lot of them are based in Abrahamic religious conflict, because obviously the Jews were the original founders of Judaism, the original Abrahamic faith, and then the Christians sort of made their own sect, and then the Muslims made their own sect. They're all part of the Abrahamic faith, and the Christians and the Muslims have beef with the Jews because they're all arguing over ideology. And in a lot of Christian teachings and a lot of Islamic teachings, the Jews are made out to be evil and the bad guys, the synagogue of Satan. You know, the Islamic Hamas charter, the end of days, they're going to kill all the Jews. So when you have these ideologies, there's going to be trouble. In Christianity, you hear a lot of Catholics call them the Antichrist. This is why the likes of Nick Fuentes dislike the Jews. It's all a load of rubbish. And there's no need to have any dogmatic or irrational dislike of the Jews. They are like anybody else. They have good parts, bad parts. You can criticize them for some things and you can compliment for them some things, but they have no inherent evilness about them. It's a load of rubbish. And there's no conspiracy by the Jews to flood us with migrants and all that stuff. And with that being said, there may be some liberal Jews who are doing it, yes, but you also have a lot of Christians doing it, such as the Catholic Church promote open borders, the Church of England promote open borders. So within Christianity, Judaism, Islam, right-wing politics, left-wing politics, you have people promoting all these evil agenda, but ultimately it's a spiritual problem rather than a ethnic or political problem. Okay, and to finish the video, I always like to provide the solution. And I think the solution is to not obsess over ideologies and politics and religion. None of these are going to solve our problems. Our problem will be solved by our spiritual father and Christ's spirit. I'm not really talking too much Christianity. I'm talking about understanding Christianity mystically with the power of the spirit, which is represented by Christ. And if our country needs a solution, I would say it would be something like mystic Christian ethno-nationalism. And the reason I say mystical Christian ethno-nationalism is because you have the mystic, which represents the spirit, Christian, which would be looking at Christianity through mystic eyes, ethno, because it's about the English people, and nationalism is about being patriotic to the English. But we put the mystic and Christ first. And that will allow us not to be turned to hate. So my vision for England would be the same vision that Jesus had for the Jews. And what Jesus taught, different than what probably was being taught at the time, is that yes, Jesus was a proud Jew, but first and foremost, he was the Christ and he represented the Father, and that he taught through that spirit that you should love everybody. And just because people are from different tribes, you shouldn't hate them. That's my opinion. Okay, yes, I'm saying that we all know that English are ethnically English, and that we should be proud and we should protect our ethno-English and our country and Englishness. But I have no ill will and hate to anyone, and that I'm happy and more than happy to welcome other people into our tribe as long as it's done in sensible numbers. Because if we have 80% non-English, then it's not going to be an English country, and that goes for every country in the world. And that's why it needs to be focused on Christ and the Father first. When it's only based on the flesh, you end up going down these weird avenues that the likes of Adolf Hitler went down, where you persecute non-German for him. And what the National Socialists in our country will end up doing, they'll be persecuting the Jews because they believe that they're leaders of a conspiracy, and they'll be persecuting all non-white English for their own bizarre reasons. Okay, so that's the point of my video today. It's a very complex subject, but I think I've made a pretty good argument for what is the best way forward. I haven't made a video for probably about a month or so. I've just been taking some time to contemplate, learn, and a lot of the online content is a bit pointless, I believe. I'm not here to just make videos for the sake of it. I want to actually make real world change, and that's what I've been working in the meantime. And I've ultimately come to the conclusion that Christ has to be the avenue for us to save our country, but not really Christianity. It has to be Christ understood mystically, spiritually, but Christianity also has to be part of the solution, because our country's history is mostly through Christianity and was built on Christian values. My goal was similar to what Jesus' goal was 2,000 years ago. Jesus didn't have a problem with Judaism. He just wanted people to be born again of the Spirit and bring Spirit to the religion, bring real truth and spirit, and go out and be the light of the world and have good fruits. And that's my goal for Christianity. I believe it needs to be more mystical, and the fruits need to bear more positive actions in the world rather than the absolute state of the Church of England. So I would either want to reform the church, or, as I'm doing something more Christ-like. And I changed this channel from Christ of England to Guardians of the United Kingdom because I was having a lot of problems with Christians saying you're heretical. But I think I'm going to change it back to Christ of England at some point, because I think Christ has to be the main focus. And I'm not going to worry about arguing about theology. I'm just going to go and do the work of Christ in the United Kingdom. And it will be about example and knowing us by our fruits, and not going to spend much time arguing about theology. And hopefully I can bring all the Christian denominations to the Christ of England as well, or to be a part of it. We can join all of the Christian people together at the Christ of England to say, look, regardless of our beliefs, we need to serve Christ to save our country. And Christ can be the main focus. Everybody needs to forget about politics. We're not going to solve our problems through politics. We're only going to solve our problems through Christ and the Father. That's the only way we can solve our problems. Okay, so if you like what I'm talking about and you're new here, subscribe to the channel. Next year, I'm really going to be stepping it up in real world solutions. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of work on the teachings of the Christ of England and a website and all this stuff I'm actually working on in the meantime. So I'm still working on many things. Just because I'm not making videos doesn't mean I'm not doing some form of work. So stay subscribed. Subscribe if you're new. Like the video. Share it with as many people as you can. And God bless everybody. Goodbye.